Cool. Thank you for having me. So it feels very humbling to close out the day. I think you've heard from some fairly kind of esteemed speakers. I'm sure I'm not as keynote as some of them, but I hope you'll find the topic I'm going to talk about is really important. So what I'm here to kind of talk about is local government, but more parochially from my point of view, what is it, the digital centre for government, so the new GDS, and what is it we can do to kind of work differently and more kind of sustainably with local government. This is the new family tree. So probably over a month ago, you would have seen Secretary of State bringing together what is, we think, a really kind of compelling vision for the kind of digital leaders across government. What we are kind of working on is, well, to really kind of think, how do we kind of support the digital profession and the data profession out there in central government in particular. What the new GDS is going to continue to do is kind of to support that. That's where the bulk of the kind of the profession lies. It's outside of GDS and it's in the departments and it's on the front lines. What we're looking to do is kind of bring together, I guess, kind of all these different kind of organisations and kind of think differently about how we can kind of champion the work out there in central government and kind of continue to kind of provide that leadership and guardrails where we think that's kind of needed. But what I'm here to talk to you about is local government, and what we are looking to do, and it was announced as part of the kind of Secretary of State's kind of blueprint for modern digital government, is about what can GDS and the new GDS, what can it do differently to kind of support and help local government. As you'd all know, most of your public services that you interact with are typically delivered by your council. We know they do incredible work, and they do that with digital technology, but often with low support and often with very little resource. My mum worked in local government for 20 years. She was at Croydon Council. She retired about 15 years ago. So what I talk to her today about local government is completely unrecognisable for her. And that's partly because councils have really had to, out of necessity, kind of grapple with the low resources to kind of innovate with the kind of the pressures they have. So the environment that local government kind of sits in and with central government, it is fragmented, where we do see kind of collaboration. Some of that is limited between the different kind of levels of government, but also kind of across local authorities. And ultimately what this means is it's poorer outcomes for citizens. So what we are trying to do as part of the sprint is kind of understand what can we in the new GDS strive for. So what is it we could be? And we kind of look at, I guess, a kind of a crude characterization of where we're currently at. But this is about how do we move this kind of new organisation, albeit with kind of familiar brand names to kind of most of you, into something which is kind of deliberate, it's sustained, it's systematic, and it works with low friction. So the first steps we think for that, we are embarking on a 3-month sprint. We are kind of pleased to be working with Theo Blackwell. So I'm here kind of doing a kind of a poor impression of him. But he is, as you know, the kind of Chief Digital Officer at the Greater London Authority. But he's been asked to come in for 3 months to help kind of provide leadership and help us answer the question of how can the new GDS collaborate with local government. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about how and what we're kind of looking at and kind of share our kind of emerging thoughts as well at this stage. So we're looking at the 5 areas that you kind of see on the screen. What I think runs through it are a couple of key kind of threads for us. the word beginning with the letter D, data. It's through most of these. Also capacity and capability, and then leadership, and in particular kind of political and senior leadership and the buy-in from the top. So how we're kind of going about our work, we're trying to talk and learn from practitioners in local government. We are trying to make sure we take what's been their experience, the good and the bad, and how do we kind of absorb that in. Working with the LGA, but also those in central government, partnering with them in particular, the teams at Local Digital in MHCLG, but also the Cabinet Office Public Service Reform team as well. So where this kind of gets us to, it is the beginning of something, and it probably is a little bit more inward than maybe you would expect, but we are targeting effectively a set of recommendations to ministers within DCIT, but also MHCLG and Cabinet Office about what we think kind of needs to happen, with some really pointed things for our organisation and new GDS to help spearhead that. So I think where we want this to kind of take us, and hopefully other kind of parts of the public sector along, is so it's a kind of the beginning of what we're saying is a kind of an applied collaboration journey. So it's moving from something which is probably ad hoc, reactive, to something which is a lot more kind of intentional. We do think we have a new offer to give when we work with local government, but also it's about kind of showing that and kind of putting a bit of a path on this in terms of how do we demonstrate those changes so it doesn't just look different, but it kind of feels different at the same time. So I guess in the spirit of working in the open, I'm going to kind of share a couple of emerging thoughts. Some of these will resonate with you. It's things which you probably say, I would have told you this over a cup of coffee. Some of those you might react in the opposite way and say you really don't agree. We are at a stage where we want to kind of work in both directions. So to tell you what we think, but also more importantly to kind of hear what you think and see how you react. So you can find me after and kind of tell me where you agree or where you disagree. We're here to kind of do as much of this with the sector. So I'm going to just kind of skip through a couple of these. You'll get to see the detail in terms of the slides. But this is one of the areas where, so around kind of AI, with obviously with the incubator for AI, they've been delivering a few products which have predominantly had a central government kind of focus to it. But we do think there is some application for products like Minute and Consult as well, although Minute's probably more in the kind of the reckoning there. What we probably have recognised though is actually the use case generation for local delivery is not something which, kind of I think has been at the forefront of kind of incubator for AI, and also things like, the kind of the wider kind of GDS kind of offering. So we think more focus needs to be paid around actually that use case ideas for supporting local delivery. The next kind of bucket is around kind of the technology and the kind of the wider kind of ICT market. So as will be apparently obvious to all of you, the kind of the products and kind of, services you want to build and that you are kind of delivering, most of them often do need locally held data. But what we keep on hearing around challenges around that data flow and the portability of that, sometimes locked into quite big kind of systems and applications. There is work going on with David Knott, the Chief Technology Officer, about kind of, and that's coming from the Modern Blueprint, about what is the aspiration that we want for technology and how should that kind of have kind of ramifications for data. But we are certainly seeing that there is at local government level some real kind of issues around kind of data portability. Next, National Data Library, but I'm just going to call this data, and I think kind of for a local authority, what it's obviously really kind of animated about, and what kind of really, you know, gets most of its kind of staff really motivated is how do they serve their local population and those who are the most vulnerable. The hypothesis for us is that the data they hold just within their organisation is probably not of a sufficient scale in terms of really understanding those hard to reach communities. And this is where kind of getting data sharing right is really, really important. We have seen loads of really good kind of pockets of this, and we kind of want to really kind of celebrate those kind of initiatives. But it's about how do you get that at scale across the system, and what could be the kind of the GDS offer to support that. And that links to the National Data Library, and that's obviously kind of part of the new GDS. And it's a program which, you know, kind of will, you know, hopefully kind of take a local government dimension to it. And we're kind of working closely with the program team there in terms of making sure our findings can align with the decisions they are kind of thinking of taking about where they want that to go. So we're really keen to hear from you in the sector, be that central government, local government, or kind of in the wider, you know, the wider kind of sector around that. What's the best way to do capacity building, but also improving literacy around what can I share, how can I do it best within the safeguards that are out there. This one is, so if the others were about function, this is probably about form. And we've kind of touched on it in terms of the regional collaboration that kind of exists. And, you know, when you see it done, it's done at a pretty good scale. It's done with a really good kind of energy. But how do you sustain and kind of propagate that across the piece? There's lots to learn from, but that gap between central and local about kind of how do you best kind of promulgate the guidance, the best practice and all that sort of stuff. What can we do as kind of part of the solution for that? And we know there are lots of really good initiatives at regional level, all kind of coming out of central government departments. But what's the kind of, what's the unified kind of thing we want to kind of tell local government as a sector? Here's who you can go to, here's who you need to kind of work with. So GDS products, the kind of final thing I want to kind of just talk about. So I think having not been part of GDS historically, so I'm kind of really, hopefully not kind of talking out of turn as much, as to not be kind of too unfair, but there is probably a recognition of how does GDS approach local government and how does local government approach GDS? And we go back to that thing about it being kind of ad hoc and maybe not as kind of intentional. I think we have a really good opportunity now about some of the products that have been developed and how we can kind of get more focused uptake into local government. It links to the thing about a missing middle, so a capability to help kind of smooth and broker those kind of networks and relationships. But I think we are kind of certainly in the space where we've got things we can kind of learn in terms of what has been delivered previously, but also there are kind of some, I think, some lessons for the new GDS about how it should kind of approach local authorities and kind of think about them in the kind of design of some of the common services. So to kind of bring it to a head, so as I said, if you're working in or with local government, we really want to kind of hear from you. We want to kind of find out what works, what doesn't. And we are keen to make sure we kind of tell the story of not just what isn't working, but also where there's been some really good kind of pioneering work, and what we can do to kind of spread that around the system. So thank you for your time, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much.